We ought to be listening to our better selves. We ought to call the best in us out right now, solve this problem, and go home and be with our families. I'm going to be with my family. You guys can stay here, scream at each other all you want. I'm going home.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would remind my friend that it was President Obama who said, "This Congress cannot and should not leave for vacation until they have made sure that tax increase doesn't happen." Let me repeat that Congress should not and cannot go on vacation before they have made sure that working families aren't seeing their taxes go up by $1,000. And, Mr. Speaker, in order for their taxes not to go up by $1,000, the length of time of the payroll tax reduction has to be 1 year, not 60 days. I'm pleased to yield a minute and a half to my friend from Texas, Mr. Culberson.
Gentleman recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're sending this bill back to conference because we share Speaker John Boehner's core governing principle to do the right thing for the right reasons for the country. And the right thing to do here is to make sure nobody's payroll taxes go up for at least a year. The House bill does that. If you want your payroll taxes to go up in 2 months, then you would support the Senate bill. We are sending this bill back to conference because the Senate bill, unlike the House bill, the Senate bill does not require people applying for unemployment to either get a GED or show that they're working their way towards a degree. The Senate bill doesn't do those things, so we're obviously sending this bill back to conference. The House bill also gives states the flexibility to require unemployment beneficiaries to submit to drug testing, which is something common sense that everybody in the country can understand. The Speaker also included in the House bill the ability for businesses to expense 100% of the money they invest in new investments. And that obviously is going to create jobs immediately. The Senate took that language out. This is just not complicated. If you want your payroll taxes to stay the same for 12 months, then you would support the House bill. If you want your payroll tax to go up in 2 months, then you would support the Senate bill.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, ma'am. This is not a complicated debate. This is very straightforward. We in the House want to make sure that nobody's taxes go up for at least 1 month so people can plan, so businesses can predict, so they can expense the money that they invest, so that they can create jobs. And we also want to make sure that businesses in America can continue to create jobs.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's now my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Edwards.
Gentlelady from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 160 million Americans are wondering why Republicans want to raise their taxes on January 1st. 2.2 million Americans are wondering why the Republicans think that what unemployed people need is a drug test instead of a job, or in the absence of that, unemployment benefits. Doctors all across this country who treat Medicare patients, Mr. Speaker, are wondering why it is that Republicans want to ensure that their doctors receive 25% less than they should for treating Medicare patients. I have to tell you, I am with the American public. I'm completely confused about why Republicans in this Congress want to send Americans into January 2012 without an unemployment check, with a raise in their taxes, and cutting their Medicare benefits. That's what the American people want to know and don't understand. And they want to know why these House Republicans can't go along with what House Democrats want to do, what Senate Democrats already voted to do, what Republicans in the Senate already voted to do, and it's time for us to do the business of the American people, and with that I yield.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to my colleague as to how many speakers he has remaining?
2 speakers left.
The gentleman from South Carolina has 5 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Georgia has 7 1/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to yield a minute and a half to my physician colleague from the great state of Maryland, Mr. Harris.
The gentleman is recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you very much, Mr. Floor Leader, for yielding the time. Last time the senators passed a major bill over just before Christmas was 2009. It was the Obamacare bill. That last Congress, 211th Congress, decided not to go to conference and to accept what the Senate sent over. Mr. Speaker, I ask those Americans watching, ask themselves, How did that work for you? That's what they want us to do with this piece of legislation. Just accept what the Senate says. They want to go home for Christmas, and we'll just see how it all works out. Didn't work out so good that time, won't work out so good this time. You know, the gentleman from California said you almost need a playbook to figure out what's going on. Mr. Speaker, thank goodness we have one. It's called House.gov. You can go and you can see exactly how your representative voted on a one-year tax cut extension. We took a vote last week. You can go see that one. We're going to take 3 today, whether you want a 1-year or a 2-month. Go to House.gov. You don't have to believe what anyone says on the floor. Go to House.gov. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the other part of the bill, which is a 2-year Medicare fixed SGR. I ask those seniors who are watching, pick up the phone once this debate is over and call your doctor's office. Ask them one question. Do you want a 2-month fix or do you want a 2-year fix? That's all. Simple question. Let's see what the doctors want. I know we in Washington like to think we know best for everything that goes on, including what our Medicare seniors want and their doctors want. I ask our seniors to do that. They'll get the result. Yield back the time.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, some have suggested that we're choosing between 1 year and 2 years. The fact is that by rejecting the Senate bill, which would have created certainty for 2 months, we are instead replacing that with uncertainty that begins in 2 weeks. We won't know in 2 weeks if we doing the direction we're going in 2 weeks, we won't know what the situation will be for payrolls that start on the 1st of January. A full year consideration is not going to be achieved in the next 2 weeks. The doc fix we've been working on for years, unemployment compensation and tax policy we've been working on for a long time. The idea that we're going to appoint a conference committee and they're going to meet and agree and figure all this stuff out in a couple of days. We tried that with the super committee. It didn't work. This little conference committee isn't going to solve all of these problems in the next 10 days. And so we have a choice, 2 months of certainty or a few days of total uncertainty. Who knows what's going to happen? Economists have said if we don't extend the payroll tax and the unemployment compensation, that it will have significant adverse effects on the economy. And so we should do this. We should do it for two months, work on it for 2 months, and hopefully we'll have a solution at the end of 2 months. We certainly won't have a solution in the end of 2 weeks. And so that's the choice. And when people talk about certainty, this is a group that talked about certainty and then changed the regulations on light bulbs that have been in effect for 4 years on a 2-week notice. Here we are with certainty for 2 months, and they say, well, uncertainty is a problem, so let's do it in 2 weeks. Let's have some certainty. 2 months of certainty, let's work on it, and we can get a full-year solution. We're not going to do that the way we're headed. I would hope, Mr. Speaker, that we would adopt the Senate amendments, leave town, send the bill to the President, and be finished with it rather than invite all of this uncertainty, which is certainly going to be flawless if we don't do that.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield a minute and a half to my colleague from the great state of Texas, Mr. Conaway.
Gentleman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. This is really hard to listen to in the sense that we're being asked to simply accede to the wisdom of the Senate. The wisdom of the Senate would say that long-range planning is 2 months. The wisdom of the Senate would say that let's pay for 2 months' worth of these fixes by a permanent increase in mortgage insurance. That's unwise. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to abdicate my responsibility to vote what I believe is the best interest of the country and the best policy simply because it's Christmas. Now, we've got 2 weeks to work this out. The House has already passed an extensive bill that fixes and addresses these issues across a broad spectrum of the fixes. And to have the other side over and over say, it's really the wisdom of the Senate that you should accede to. It's really the wisdom of the Senate. Look what the Senate did, Mr. Speaker. It's irresponsible on every level to simply say 2 months is somehow going to fix these problems, that we can avoid dealing with the issue for another 2 months, and that's wise. I would argue that my colleagues on the other side are wrong-headed in this regard. We have a bill that fixes this for 2 years, 1 year on the unemployment and taxes. We've got the pay-fors in place. The conferees can come together and get this worked out over the next week and a half that we've got before these things go into effect, the bad things happen. So to ask us to yield to the Senate, to accede to the Senate's wisdom is wrong-headed on every level, and I refuse to do that, Mr. Speaker, and would argue that the House-passed bill that we passed last week should be the base bill in which to go to conference on and to work out these differences. Now I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself a minute.
Gentleman recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to say to my colleagues on the other side that there is much more to legislation than a timeline. 2 months of certainty, or we could go with the bill that this House passed. It was a year. It was their year. But what did they do with that in that year's time? They cut 40 weeks off of unemployment. Now, that might be good for them, but it's not good for the people in my state, where in spite of all the great numbers that I spoke about here earlier this afternoon, 100,000 people, more private sector jobs created over the last 5 months, the biggest number in the last since 2006. Now, I'll give myself an additional 30 seconds. Now, the only way for us to really instill certainty in the unemployed and in those 160 million Americans who would like to continue to have their tax cut is for us to pass the Senate compromise and for us to really say to those people that we want you to have a pleasant holiday season, and we'll all come back here the first of the year and give you an additional 10 months.
Gentleman's time has expired.
How much time do I have left?
Gentleman has 2 1/4 minutes remaining.
May I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Virginia?
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as the gentleman from South Carolina has indicated, we can have 2 months of certainty if we follow our lead. The Republicans have said that we'll get 1 year of extension if we follow their lead. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll see who's telling the truth. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I may say to my colleague I'm prepared to close if the gentleman will close. We're prepared to close.
Gentleman from South Carolina has 2 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to close as I opened. I said at the outset that we've been getting some tremendous, what I would call tremendously positive numbers for our economy in the past several months. And I believe that the American people are beginning to create more certainty in their lives. I would hate to see us disrupt that by continuing to debate this issue when we know full well that our failure to pass this bill will almost guarantee that 160 million working Americans will see their taxes go up, their paychecks go down. 2.2 million people who are currently unemployed through no fault of their own, looking for work, would like to contribute to the deficit reduction that we are trying to gain, but we'll see them continue in unemployment status without their benefits if we fail to pass this bill. Also, the 48 million seniors who have developed relationships with their doctors, who during this time of year depend upon the medical profession for their quality of life, could very well see their doctors experience a 27% decrease in their reimbursements if we fail to pass this bill. And we know what will happen. These doctors will walk off the field and will refuse to treat Medicare patients. I would hope that my friends would come to their senses and pass the Senate-passed compromise. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.Res. 501.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, somebody once said that whether you say you can or you can't, you're right. The other side says they can't. The other side says we can't. We believe we can. Mr. Speaker, we have 2 different versions of H.R. 3630. There's a House version and a Senate version. And everybody who knows about United States government knows that when you have 2 different versions, you come together in a conference committee and you come to common ground, work out the differences, and move the bill back to each chamber. What are the differences? Well, for the House bill, we protect seniors' access to their doctors for 24 months. How about the Senate? 2 months. The House bill, federal unemployment benefits extension, goes for 13 months. Senate, 2 months. The payroll tax cut extension, House bill, 12 months. Senate bill, 2 months. Payroll tax cut for workers earning $50,000 a year. In the House bill, it's $1,000. In the Senate bill, $167. Pay freeze for members of Congress and federal workers, included in the House bill, not in the Senate bill. Ending unemployment and food stamp benefits for millionaires, in the House bill, not in the Senate bill. So, Mr. Speaker, this is about 2 different bills, and it's about certainty. It's about certainty for families and job creators and for seniors. And it's about real jobs for real people. Our bill provides certainty and 20,000 jobs with the Keystone Pipeline construction and another 120,000 new jobs in the supply chain for the pipeline. Positive policy. Why wait? Why wait, Mr. Speaker? Why not make a decision in the next few days on these tax and health care and unemployment extensions? What's the economic or the policy argument for putting this off for another 2 months? The truth is that there is none. And there are strong arguments against delay. We ought to be working on alleviating the uncertainty that would bring about, not adding to it. Mr. Speaker, I call on my colleagues to support this resolution and move forward positively for families, for job creators, and for seniors, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 502, the previous question is ordered on the resolution and the preamble. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in support of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer the resolution previously noticed.
Clerk will report the resolution.
Whereas an article on December 15, 2011 on the Politico Pro newspaper website quoted the Republican from Florida, Mr. West, as saying, if Joseph Goebbels was around, he'd be very proud of the Democrat Party because they have an incredible propaganda machine. I think that you have, let's be honest, you know, some of the people in the media are complicit on this in enabling them to get that type of message out. Whereas Joseph Goebbels served as the Third Reich's Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda in Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. Whereas Joseph Goebbels openly used xenophobia and racism in his quest to dehumanize European Jewry. Whereas Joseph Goebbels made Jews the scapegoat of German economic insecurity, fostering flagrant anti-Semitism. Whereas the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum reports that Joseph Goebbels delivered a passionate anti-Semitic speech to the Nazi Party faithful in Munich on November 9, 1938. After the speech, Nazi officials ordered the stormtroopers, SA, and other party formations to attack Jews and to destroy their homes, businesses, and houses of worship. The violence against Jews lasts into the morning hours of November 10th and becomes known as Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass. Several dozen Jews lose their lives and tens of thousands are arrested and sent to concentration camps. Whereas Nazi Germany and their collaborators killed 6 million European Jews and millions of others as part of their final solution. Whereas by invoking the specter of Joseph Goebbels, the representative from Florida, Mr. West, thoroughly belittled the horrors and sufferings experienced by the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. Whereas the American Jewish Committee issued a December 15, 2011 statement saying, to make a linkage between any mainstream political party in the United States and the heinous atrocities committed by the Third Reich should be simply beyond the pale, whatever political differences may arise in a heated electoral season. By invoking the image of Joseph Goebbels and the Gestapo, Representative West has displayed a complete lack of understanding of the worst genocidal era in human history. Moreover, he diminished and trivialized the unique evil perpetrated by the Third Reich through his unfortunate use of language. Whereas the Anti-Defamation League said in a December 16, 2011 letter to the representative from Florida, Mr. West, we were deeply dismayed by Representative West's remarks comparing the Democratic Party's attempts to articulate views to the American people through the media to the efforts of the Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Such outrageous Holocaust analogies have no place in our political dialogue. They are offensive, they trivialize real historical events, and they diminish the memory of the 6 million Jews and millions of others who perished in the Holocaust. Whereas the representative from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, wrote in a letter to the representative from Florida, Mr. West, that the representative from Florida should help raise the level of congressional discourse in a vigorous debate. Whereas the representative from Florida, Mr. West, responded back in a letter to the representative from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, that the Democrat Party does indeed have a vicious propaganda machine. It espouses lies and deceit, and the master of deceptive information would be truly proud. Whereas in the repetition of his unhorrid and outrageous sentiment to the representative from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, the representative from Florida, Mr. West, demonstrates not only the willful and malicious misapplication of history, but also his disdain for the decorum of the Congress. And whereas the conduct of the representative from Florida, was repugnant, now therefore be it resolved that the House of Representatives disapproves of the behavior of the representative of Florida, Mr. West, for bringing discredit to the House by offending the memory of those who died during the Holocaust.
The resolution qualifies. For what purpose the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to table the resolution.
The question is on the motion to table the resolution. To lay the resolution on the table, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Opinion chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentlelady from Maryland.
I'd ask for the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those in support of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20. This 15-minute vote on the motion to table will be followed by 5-minute votes on the adoption of the motion to instruct on H.R. 3630 and adoption of the House Resolution 501. This is a 15-minute vote.
It's a 15-minute vote on a motion to table a resolution, Democratic resolution, that would disapprove of Republican Representative Alan West of Florida for saying, in a quote, that Joseph Goebbels would be, quote, proud of the Democrat Party because they have an incredible propaganda machine. Donna Edwards brought the resolution to the floor of the House, saying earlier, quote, such outrageous Holocaust analogies have no place in our political dialogue. It is a 15-minute vote, the first of what appears to be 3 votes on the House floor. And as you've been watching today, all of the debate today largely about the payroll tax cut legislation. Earlier, the House, by a vote of 229 to 193, blocked the Senate legislation, but did in that same vote call for the House to go to conference on the Senate legislation. Shortly after that vote, both President Obama and Speaker John Boehner came out to speak with reporters, and the President came out during the White House briefing with Jay Carney. He said that the House should pass the Senate version and, quote, give the American people the assurance they need in this holiday season. During this 15-minute vote, we're going to show you both the comments of Speaker Boehner and first President Obama.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is no secret that there hasn't been an abundance of partisanship in Washington this year. And that's why what happened on Saturday was such a big deal. Nearly the entire Senate, including almost all of the Republicans, voted to prevent 160 million working Americans from receiving a tax increase on January 1st. Nearly the entire Senate voted to make sure that nearly 2.5 million Americans who are out there looking for a job don't lose their unemployment insurance in the first 2 months of next year. And just about everybody, Democrats and Republicans, committed to making sure that early next year we find a way to extend the payroll tax cut and unemployment insurance through the end of 2012. But now, even though Republicans and Democrats in the Senate were willing to compromise for the good of the country, a faction of Republicans in the House are refusing to even vote on the Senate bill, a bill that cuts taxes for 160 million Americans. And because of their refusal to cooperate, all those Americans could face a tax hike in just 11 days. And millions of Americans who are out there looking for work could find their unemployment insurance expired. Now, let's be clear. Right now, the bipartisan compromise that was reached on Saturday is the only viable way to prevent a tax hike on January 1st. It's the only one. All of the leaders in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, say they are committed to making sure we extend the payroll tax cut and unemployment insurance for the entire year. And by the way, this is something I called for months ago. The issue is that the Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate worked on a one-year deal, made good progress, but determined that they needed more time to reach an agreement. And that's why they passed an insurance policy to make sure the taxes don't go up on January 1st. In fact, the House Republicans say they don't dispute the need for a payroll tax cut. What they are really trying to do, what they're holding out for, is to wring concessions from Democrats on issues that have nothing to do with the payroll tax cut, issues where the parties fundamentally disagree. So a one-year deal is not the issue. We can and we will come to that agreement as long as it's focused on the payroll tax cut and unemployment insurance and not focused on extraneous issues. The issue right now is this. The clock is ticking. Time is running out. And if the House Republicans refuse to vote for the Senate bill, or even allow it to come up for a vote, taxes will go up in 11 days. I saw today that one of the House Republicans referred to what they're doing as, quote, high-stakes poker. He's right about the stakes, but this is not poker. This is not a game. This shouldn't be politics as usual. Right now, the recovery is fragile, but it is moving in the right direction. Our failure to do this could have effects not just on families, but on the economy as a whole. It's not a game for the average family who doesn't have an extra $1,000 to lose. It's not a game for somebody who's out there looking for work right now and might lose his house if unemployment insurance doesn't come through. This is not a game for the millions of Americans who will take a hit when the entire economy grows more slowly because these proposals aren't extended. You know, I just got back from a ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base where we received the flag and the colors that our troops fought under in Iraq. And I met with some of the last men and women to return home from that war. And these Americans and all Americans who serve are the embodiment of courage and selflessness and patriotism. And when they fight together and sometimes die together, they don't know and they certainly don't care who's a Democrat and who's a Republican and how somebody's doing in the polls and how this might play in the spin room. They work as a team and they do their job. And they do it for something bigger than themselves. The people in this town need to learn something from them. We have more important things to worry about than politics right now. We have more important things to worry about than saving face or figuring out internal caucus politics. We have people who are counting on us to make their lives just a little bit easier, to build an economy where hard work pays off and responsibility is rewarded. And we owe it to them to come together right now and do the right thing. That's what the Senate did. Democrats and Republicans in the Senate said, we're going to put our fights on other issues aside and go ahead and do what's right on something we all agree to. Let's go ahead and do it. We'll have time later for the politics. We'll have time later to have fights around a whole bunch of other issues. Right now, though, we know this is good for the economy, and they went ahead and did the right thing. I need the Speaker and House Republicans to do the same. Put politics aside, put aside issues where there are fundamental disagreements, and come together on something we agree on. And let's not play brinksmanship. The American people are weary of it. They're tired of it. They expect better. I'm calling on the Speaker and the House Republican leadership to bring up the Senate bill for a vote and give the American people the assurance they need in this holiday season. Thank you.
And minutes after the President spoke, and shortly after the House had rejected the Senate legislation on payroll tax cut, the short-term extension, the Speaker of the House and other Republican leaders came out to speak to reporters at the Capitol.
The President and leaders of both houses of Congress have called for a year-long extension of the payroll tax credit. The House has passed a bill that would do just that. It would extend and reform unemployment insurance, protect Social Security, and create jobs. We're proud of the bill that we passed. The House passed it with bipartisan support. Now, we also understand the Senate passed a different bill. We oppose that bill because the 2-month extension will create more uncertainty for job creators in our country when millions of Americans are out of work. The payroll processing companies say that the Senate bill is unworkable and so complex that many Americans may not even get the tax credit. So today, we have voted to go to a formal conference to resolve the differences between the two bills. This is a system that our founders gave us. It's as old as our nation and as clear as the Constitution. Our House GOP negotiators are here and ready to work with their counterparts in the Senate to resolve the differences as quickly as possible. Our negotiators are Kevin Brady, David Camp, Renee Elmers, Nan Hayworth, Tom Price, Tom Reed, Fred Upton, and Greg Walton. Now it's up to the President to show real leadership. He said that he won't leave town for the holidays until this bill is done. The next step is clear. I think President Obama needs to call on Senate Democrats to go back into session, move to go to conference, and to sit down and resolve this bill as quickly as possible. I sent a letter to the President today asking him to do just this. We've done our work for the American people. Now it's up to the President and Democrats in the Senate to do their job as well. With that, we'll take a couple of questions.
Senate Democrats say they're not coming back. So does this mean the tax cuts are going to last?
We have done our job. All we need now is to resolve our differences. A 2-month extension is nothing more than kicking the can down the road. The President has asked us to do this for a full year. We did it for a full year. We offset the cost with reasonable offsets. There's no reason we can't do this. If you remember, just several weeks ago, the House had passed a DOD authorization bill. The Senate passed theirs. In the period of less than a week, they were able to resolve big differences in these two very large bills. There's no reason why we can't resolve this in short order.
If, say, Senator Reid were to say, we'll get a deal here, let's sit down, you and me, and work this out, and let's solve this, would you not forge ahead with a conference committee, or would that just be a facade for actually getting this problem solved? If the President, Harry Reid, and you said, yeah, let's get this worked out.
There are a lot of ways to resolve this. We're doing this under what we would call regular order, the system that our founders gave us. If there's a difference between the two houses, we sit down and resolve those differences.
Are House members going to go home for the holidays until this is resolved, or are you going to keep them here?
Our negotiators are here, ready and able to work. Members of the leadership will be here, ready and able to work. We'll be available to do what needs to be done. But the issue now is, will the President engage with the Senate Democrats and bring them to the table so we can resolve this and give to the President what he has asked us to give him, a 1-year extension of these expiring programs.
The President, of course, has just said, he appealed to you personally, he said, I need John Boehner to help out. And
I need the President to help out, all right?
Speaker, I had a question. He's asked you to help out, and of course has asked that you all take up the Senate bill, which you have not done. Any chance of that happening?
The Senate bill, we've already taken up the Senate bill. We rejected the Senate bill, and we moved to go to conference. Under the rules of the Congress, that means the papers that were in our possession are on their way back to the United States Senate. Mr. Espo.
Sure, thank you. The Senate passed a 2-month bill. The House has passed a 1-year bill. Is the length of a compromise in question?
The Senate voted to give the American people a $166 tax cut. We voted to give the American people a $1,000 tax cut. We're going to insist on doing this the right way.
You said that you could try to do this in short order, but you guys have been working on this for weeks and haven't been able to come to an agreement. What makes you feel that you can actually do that from now and New Year's?
Well, we've not been working on this for weeks. I'm going to make clear. I told the Senate leaders, both Senator Reid and Senator McConnell, that there would be no negotiations with the House until such time as the Senate passed a bill. I meant what I said. And when they were getting ready to pass this, and somebody passed on to me what they thought it would look like, I made it clear to them at that point that I was uncomfortable with where they were going. I expressed my displeasure in, once again, taking the convenient route and not doing the people's work. Thanks, everybody.
Comments from within the hour from Speaker Boehner. Chad Pergram tweets that since then, Steny Hoyer has reintroduced the Senate payroll bill. He also tweets that House Republican leaders have told rank and file the payroll bill is back in the Senate, quote, where it will await the appointment of their conferees. Follow congressional reporters and members of Congress at twitter.com/C-SPAN. Well, just moments ago, Nancy Pelosi says if there's no extension to the payroll tax cut, it's because of the Tea Party and Republicans. We're going to show you part of her briefing as much as we can as this 15-minute vote continues.
Good afternoon. Just when we think we've seen the last of each other, here we are again. and we're prepared to stay here until the job really does get done, where the American people will have a payroll tax cut. As you know, people across the nation, indeed even across the political spectrum, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, all have said one thing to us. They want us to work together. They want us to work together, and they support a payroll tax cut for the middle class, 160 million people to benefit. They want us to work together to create jobs, which a payroll tax cut does do. The Senate did just that. In a bipartisan way, they overwhelmingly passed a payroll tax cut, which continues the economic growth, the momentum of our economic growth, and does get that $1,000 tax cut into the pockets of the American people. It also gave us hope. It gave us hope that here was an example of how we could come together, work together in a bipartisan way, sharing a purpose, which was to give the tax cut and tax fairness to the American people. The Republicans of the House would not take yes for an answer. This was too bad because it rejected the bipartisanship, which was so hopeful, and the tax cut, which was so necessary, as well as the unemployment insurance extension of benefits and the SGR. And so they didn't take yes for an answer because they are no on the tax cut. The record shows, and our distinguished whip will speak to the statements made by Speaker Boehner and others. It wasn't until President Obama took this message across the country as part of the American Jobs Act that we would have a payroll tax cut which would give immediate relief, put $1,000 in the pockets of America's working families, 160 million workers, and inject demand into the economy. The American people responded very positively to it. Probably 50-some to 30-some% of Republicans support the payroll tax cut. And we had the opportunity, we still have the opportunity to do that. After the Senate acted on Saturday, we were hopeful that we could take this up and our work would be done. But apparently the Tea Party tail is wagging the elephant. The American people have a right to, I think it's really clear, the fact, this is the fact. If we do not, and I hope this doesn't prevail, but if we do not have a tax cut, a middle-income tax cut, if we do not have a payroll tax cut come January 1, it will be because of the Tea Party minority within the Republican majority. The Tea Party minority there will be holding up the tax cut. When Republicans in the Senate, Republicans across the country, and some Republicans in the House support this payroll tax cut. That's why they didn't give us a chance to vote on the Senate bill. They're afraid they would lose. And so you see the Speaker coming with great confidence, talking about process. It's not about process, it's about results. Okay, American people have a right to ask the question, why are you putting process before a payroll tax cut? The President has said, and the Senate deliberations indicated, that we all want, as we have said, a one-year tax cut, payroll tax cut. The Senate said they needed more time to get this done, but in the meantime, we would remove all doubt that this tax cut would be there for the next 2 months. So there's time to negotiate how we go further into the next year. But right now, we have to remove all doubt that this tax cut will be there for the middle class. So we have on the House side, under the leadership of our ranking member, Sandy Levin, of the Ways and Means Committee, reintroduced the Senate bill. So there's no procedural barrier to us just voting on this bill today, in the next 10 minutes, in the next hour, in the course of the day.
Kentucky. Mr. Davis of Kentucky votes aye.
It's open.
Mr. Serrano. Mr. Serrano votes no. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes no. Mr. Nadler. Mr. Nadler votes no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 231, the nays are 188. Majority voting in the affirmative, the motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the question on the motion to instruct on H.R. 3630 offered by the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, on which the ayes and nays are ordered. Clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to instruct conferees offered by Mr. Hoyer of Maryland.
Question is on the motion to instruct. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
Five-minute vote here on essentially what is the Democratic position on the payroll tax cut. Earlier, the House, by a vote of 229 to 193, rejected the Senate version, the Senate short-term extension of the payroll tax cut legislation. This is a 5-minute vote, and we spoke earlier to a Capitol Hill reporter for an update on where things stand. Us to get a clearer picture of all this is Kate Hunter, congressional reporter with Bloomberg Government. Thanks for joining us, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Why have House Republican leaders set up a vote to reject the Senate-passed payroll tax cut bill instead of allowing a simple clean up or down vote on it?
Well, House Republican leaders have been saying that their preference is to go to conference and work out some kind of year-long extension with the Senate rather than to just pass a 2-month extension, which they say doesn't provide the kind of certainty necessary to job creators and to, provide an economic stimulus. So they would prefer to work out, they're now saying they would prefer to work out some kind of year-long deal. The problem is the Senate has declared that they're done voting for the year, and obviously time is running short, and they haven't yet been able to reach a deal on a year-long extension.
Rank and file Republicans met with their leaders last evening for over 2 hours. What was their message to leadership?
Well, from what I determined after the conference, a lot of that discussion had to do with kind of the plans for the rest of the year. Obviously, the holidays are approaching. Members are anxious to get home to their districts and their families. So I think a lot of the discussion had to do with kind of the strategy for, I'll put it this way, dispensing with the Senate bill, whether, as you said, to have a straight up or down vote on it, or whether to vote instead, as they've decided to do, essentially to sort of reject the Senate amendment and go to conference. And then there was also some discussion, from what I understand, talking to members leaving the meeting about whether members would be required to stick around after today or whether they would be given the green light to go home.
What are House Republican leaders hoping to accomplish with the sense of the House resolution that they'll also vote on today?
Well, the sense of the House resolution kind of functions as like a motion to instruct conferees. It basically is sort of insisting on or, reiterating House Republican support for the measure that they passed on December 13th, which was a year-long extension that included a number of offsets, such as a pay freeze for federal employees that a lot of Democrats found objectionable and basically became a non-starter in the Senate.
Do we know what will happen after the House wraps up work today?
Well, I think everyone's kind of waiting with bated breath, myself included, to find out. I just spoke with Majority Leader Cantor's office, and they handle the schedule, and I spoke with them just right before this interview, and they said that they're in the process of making a decision both about whether the House will be in session tomorrow and also about whether members will again be given the green light to leave town. There was some question about whether the conferees, because what the House is going to do after it, presuming that, it does in fact move to go to conference, which seems like the expected outcome, the House is going to appoint its conferees, most likely the Senate, again, is left town, so they're probably not going to follow suit. But the question is whether all members will be allowed to leave, whether conferees only will be required to stick around, whether everyone's going to stick around, whether there'll be more votes. It's all kind of up in the air at the moment.
So with the Senate out of town, what is Majority Leader Reid saying about the House's request for a conference?
Well, Majority Leader Reid has said basically that, you know, the Senate has passed its 2-month extension. He's pointed out that, you know, that 2-month deal received very broad support in the Senate, you know, 89 senators supporting it, and he's basically called on the House to, you know, approve that extension as a way of whether or not, he's basically said that whether or not there's a formal conference, that what makes the most sense is to, you know, pass a 2-month extension now to make sure that unemployment benefits, physician payment rates don't change, unemployment benefits don't expire, and that the payroll tax cut doesn't expire come January 1st, and then said, you know, that there's no reason why informal negotiations can't go on between now and the time the 2-month extension would run out in order to get a broader deal on a year-long extension. So his strategy has been to say, why don't we do this 2-month deal, and then that will buy us a little bit of time to work out a broader deal. House Republicans haven't been willing to go along with that plan.
So what's your prediction for how all this gets resolved? Will taxes go up for working taxpayers the first of the year?
Well, if there is a path forward to avoid that happening, it's certainly not clear at the moment. You know, anything can happen, especially in the late days of the year. But it certainly seems like there's not a clear path towards preventing the payroll tax cut from expiring come January 1st. I guess the question then becomes when Congress comes back in January, if they're able or willing to reach some kind of a resolution that would perhaps do something retroactively or at least pick up, you know, reenact the payroll cut once it's expired. And that obviously still remains up in the air.
And finally, how's this affecting your holiday?
Well, it's up in the air like everyone else's at the moment.
Kate Hunter is with Bloomberg Government. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And the House has since rejected the Senate measure.
The ayes are 183, the nays are 238, less than the majority voting in the affirmative. The motion is not adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for...
House will be in order. House will be in order.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Maryland.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute for the purposes of inquiring of what the schedule will be as we go forward.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to reserve the right to object.
The right to object. Gentlewoman from West Virginia is recognized on her reservation.
I just want to get a chance to react. If the gentleman can proceed, I'll hold. I'll withdraw my reservation.
Reservations withdrawn. Gentleman from Maryland.
I thank the gentlelady for withdrawing her objection. I've just been handed it may have been sent out earlier, but a member's advisory which says that the House will be in session as necessary to consider a conference report on H.R. 3630, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2011. The House's request for a conference will be transmitted to the United States Senate this afternoon, where it will await appointment of Senate conferees. To be clear, H.R. 3630 will physically reside in the U.S. Senate by the close of business today. Then it goes on to say members will be provided with at least 24 hours notice prior to the House's next recorded vote. What I wanted to ask the Majority Leader, does he expect his members to go home this afternoon? I yield to my friend.
Mr. Speaker, I respond to the gentleman. As he has just read, we have sent out a notice electronically to all members. Our intention is for the conferees to do their work. We have requested that the Senate do the same, appoint their conferees so we can iron out the differences, so we can afford a year-long tax relief for the working people of this country. And that is...
claiming my time, I understand the Majority Leader's position, but he didn't answer my question as to whether his members intend to go home this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, I will say to the gentleman, it's very clear. I know he is holding the same piece of paper that I am, and it reflects the electronic message that went out to all members. Our intention is for the conferees to go to work, to iron out the differences that are narrow, to ensure
House will be in order.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Speaker. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, as the gentleman knows, to ensure what can happen is what all of us want to happen, that we afford a year-long tax relief to all working people in this country. I yield back.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Majority Leader's observations. I don't think that I got an answer to the question, but having said that, if, in fact, an agreement is not reached prior to say, middle of next week, is the House prepared to preclude the eventuality of 160 million people losing that tax cut? Are you prepared to preclude? Are you prepared to preclude the possibility of 48 million people leaving their Medicare benefits? Are you prepared to preclude 2.3 million people losing their unemployment insurance by acting on an overwhelmingly bipartisan agreement that was reached in the United States Senate? I yield to my friend.
I thank the gentleman. I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, what I would say is the House has acted. We have again taken the position that all people, I think, in this building have taken, which is it's so much better and more desirable for us to provide certainty to the working families of this country who deserve the year-long certainty of tax relief. No one thinks that 60-day extension is even workable, and I think most experts would say could cause unnecessary uncertainty, could cause additional costs to be incurred by businesses, and could hurt workers. So I'd say to the gentleman, the House has acted. It is up to the Senate to act to stave off this tax hike.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Speaker, while there is clearly a difference in this House on a number of things, one of the things that I don't think we differ on is a confidence or a lack of confidence that the Senate will do its job. I don't think we differ on that greatly because our experiences shows us differently. So that what I'm asking the gentleman is that we do not put at risk the 160 million people who are expecting their tax cut to continue, the 48 million people, seniors who want access to their doctors, and the 2.3 million people who are going to go off unemployment, contingent upon whether the Senate acts as the gentleman wants it to. I will tell you, my experience has not been a great confidence that that will happen. If, I will tell the gentleman further, we have tried to prepare for that contingency. We have introduced a bill with 170 co-sponsors which adopts the compromise agreement so that we will give that certainty of which the gentleman speaks, allay the anxiety which we know exists, and give to those 160 million people the certainty they'll get the tax cut, the 48 million, the certainty they'll have access to their doctors, and the 2.3 million, the certainty that they will not be kicked off the unemployment rolls so they won't be able to support themselves and their families. I asked my friend if he will be prepared to bring that bill to the floor if in fact the Senate doesn't act.
I'd say to the gentleman, if the gentleman wants to do his part in trying to make sure that the process moves forward, certainly the Democratic side of the aisle and the Minority Leader has the obligation to appoint conferees. And if we are all to continue to work together, which I believe we can, because I think the people of this country are tired of hearing what Washington can't do and want to see what we can do. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, the people of this country are beginning to wonder about the body on the other side of this Capitol and are wondering what the leader over there has against the middle class of this country. We would say, Mr. Speaker, it's time for us to come together. All of us, including the President, believe it's inexcusable to not allow for a year-long extension of the payroll tax relief.
Reclaiming my time.
House will be in order. The gentleman
Reclaiming
from
my
Maryland
time.
has
Reclaiming my
control of
time,
the
Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. 6 months ago, the Speaker said that he thought the one-year extension of the middle-class tax cut was a short-term gimmick. He said that 6 months ago of the year extension. So we're somewhat concerned about the commitment to a one-year extension. But that aside, let me say to my friend, one of the problems that I'm worried about is, A, whether we can get this work done in the next 14 days, because we know that even if we had a conference, they take a long time, very significant differences between us. In fact, we have compromised on something that you indicated in our colloquies about a week ago was very important, and that was the Keystone Bill, which your side believes will create significant number of jobs. That, of course, is in the bill that the Senate sent us because even though the Democratic majority was not for it, they cared enough about the middle-class tax cut to compromise. Unfortunately, I will tell my friend, too often we have seen on this floor unwillingness to compromise, even on your bills. We had a CR on the floor. We had a CR on this floor on March 15th. Unfortunately, 54 of your members walked away from that. On April 15th, we had a continuing resolution to keep the government open. 59 Republicans walked away from that. On June 23rd, you left the Biden talks. On July 22nd, Speaker Boehner walked away from the debt limit negotiations with he and the President. On August 1st, 66 Republicans walked away on the debt limit extension, which was your bill, not ours, your bill. On November 17th, some 101 Republicans walked away from passing an appropriation bill which would keep 3 agencies funded. On December 16th, 86 Republicans walked away from the bill to fund the balance of government. So I might say to my friend, it seems to me what we're doing today is walking away today from those 160 million people, walking away from those 48 million seniors, and walking away from those 2.3 million unemployed. And I yield back the balance of my time.